I thought my daughter-in-law Jessica was planning an innocent family Christmas until I overheard her phone call with her sister. 31 relatives staying for a week will definitely drive the old bat out permanently, she whispered, laughing coldly. Once she's overwhelmed and breaks down completely, Uncle George will document her obvious dementia and will have her declared incompetent by New Year's. My blood turned to ice as I realized this wasn't about holiday tradition. This was a calculated scheme to steal my late husband's $800,000 Victorian home, and they planned to use Christmas chaos as their weapon. Standing frozen in my hallway, clutching the laundry basket against my chest, I felt the foundation of my world crumbling beneath me. 2 years had passed since my beloved husband Robert died of a sudden heart attack, leaving me rattled and desperately lonely in our 4-bedroom home. When my son Michael announced his engagement to Jessica Martinez, a bubbly insurance adjuster from Phoenix, I welcomed her with open arms and genuine gratitude. Those early months felt like a blessing. Jessica called me Mom Kathy with apparent affection, bringing homemade snickerdoodles every Sunday and listening patiently to my stories about Robert's career as a high school principal. She seemed genuinely interested in our family history, asking detailed questions about the house Robert and I had lovingly restored over 30 years of marriage. Michael, my only child, worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative traveling 3 weeks out of every month across the Southwest Territory. When he suggested that he and Jessica move in temporarily to help with household maintenance and provide me companionship, it seemed like perfect timing. The house felt cavernous without Robert's gentle presence, and I craved the warmth of family voices filling the empty rooms again. However, subtle changes began creeping into my daily routine, like shadows lengthening at sunset. Jessica rearranged the living room furniture, claiming the traditional layout felt cramped and outdated for modern entertaining. She donated Robert's favorite leather recliner to charity without explaining that the brown upholstery clashed with her vision for a fresh contemporary aesthetic, and that the chair looked unsanitary and moldy. When I protested losing this cherished piece where Robert had read his evening newspaper for decades, Jessica's eyes filled with crocodile tears. She apologized profusely, claiming she only wanted to help me transition gracefully into this new chapter of my life. She suggested that holding on to too many reminders of the past might be preventing me from healing properly and moving forward. Gradually, Jessica's belongings migrated throughout the house like an invasive species. Her exercise equipment appeared in the sunroom where I used to tend my orchids. Her collection of contemporary art replaced the family portraits Robert and I had carefully arranged in the hallway. Most unsettling, she began dropping hints that the master bedroom's king-size bed was too large for one person, and that I might feel more cozy and secure in the smaller guest room. Each suggestion came wrapped in apparent concern for my well-being, delivered with that same syrupy sweetness that had initially charmed me. Jessica possessed a remarkable talent for making her desires sound like generous offers to improve my quality of life. When I hesitated or questioned these changes, she would sigh sadly and explain that she was simply trying to help me downsize responsibly before I became too overwhelmed to make good decisions. The first truly alarming incident occurred 3 weeks ago when I decided to collect the mail myself instead of letting Jessica handle it as had become her routine. Among the usual bills and advertisements, I discovered correspondence that made my stomach drop like a stone into dark water. An envelope from Bradshaw Monroe and Associates, a real estate law firm downtown, contained a letter addressed to me regarding property transfer consultation services and discussion of estate planning optimization strategies. The signature at the bottom of my supposed response letter accepting their services was clearly my name, but I had never written those words or contacted any real estate attorney. Even more disturbing was a thick packet from the county assessor's office concerning ownership verification requests and property tax reassessment procedures. Again, my forged signature appeared on request forms I had never seen, much less completed and submitted. My hands trembled as I studied the handwriting. Someone had practiced my signature, extensively perfecting the slight leftward slant and the particular way I crossed my T's. The forgery was skilled enough to fool casual observation, but obvious to someone familiar with their own handwriting patterns developed over 7 decades. That evening, I quietly approached Jessica about the mysterious correspondence, maintaining a confused and slightly worried expression. I explained that I couldn't remember contacting any lawyers or county offices, wondering aloud if this might be some sort of identity theft or bureaucratic error. Jessica's reaction confirmed my worst suspicions. Instead of expressing surprise or concern, she quickly took the letters from my hands, glancing at them with obvious familiarity. She assured me not to worry, explaining that she had helped me fill out some routine paperwork several weeks ago when I was feeling particularly scattered and forgetful. She claimed I had asked for her assistance with boring legal stuff, and that she was simply protecting me from unnecessary stress. Her explanation made no logical sense, but she delivered it with such confident authority that someone genuinely confused might have accepted it gratefully. I nodded slowly, thanking her for her thoughtfulness, while my mind raced with terrifying implications. Jessica had been systematically laying the groundwork to legally steal my home, forging my signature on official documents, and creating a paper trail that would support claims about my diminishing mental capacity. The sweet, caring daughter-in-law persona had been an elaborate mask concealing a predator who viewed me as nothing more than an obstacle between her and valuable real estate. As I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, I realized how expertly I had been manipulated. Every suggestion about downsizing, every comment about my forgetfulness, every helpful offer to handle my paperwork had been carefully calculated moves in a chess game where I was the unwitting opponent being maneuvered toward checkmate. The next morning, Jessica bounced into the kitchen with artificial enthusiasm radiating from her like heat from a furnace. She had prepared my favorite blueberry pancakes, setting the table with the good china and fresh flowers from my own garden. The elaborate breakfast setup immediately put me on high alert, recognizing it as the prelude to something significant. "Mom, Kathy, I have the most wonderful Christmas surprise," she announced, practically vibrating with excitement as she poured fresh orange juice into crystal glasses. "My entire family wants to spend Christmas week here with us. Isn't that amazing?" She proceeded to outline her vision with the enthusiasm of someone planning a delightful family reunion. Her parents, Eduardo and Rosa Martinez, would arrive from Phoenix, along with her 5 siblings, Linda, Carlos, Maria, Roberto, and Sofia. Each sibling was bringing their spouse and children, creating a total headcount that made my eyes widen with disbelief. "It's only 31 people," Jessica continued as if that number represented a small, intimate gathering. "Everyone is so excited to finally meet you properly and experience a real traditional Christmas in this gorgeous, historic home." She had prepared detailed lists outlining the sleeping arrangements, meal schedules, and activity plans with the precision of a military operation. The guest rooms would house her parents and Uncle George, the physician she mentioned frequently. The living room would accommodate air mattresses for the teenage cousins. The finished basement would become a dormitory for the adult siblings and their spouses. Most concerning was Jessica's meal plan, which she presented as a collaboration, but structured as a series of non-negotiable assignments. Since I was the homeowner and hostess, I would be responsible for preparing breakfast each morning for all 31 guests. She suggested hearty American fare, scrambled eggs, bacon sausage hash browns, pancakes, fresh fruit salad, and homemade biscuits with preserves. Christmas Eve dinner would be my responsibility as well, featuring traditional holiday favorites that would require days of preparation. The menu included roasted turkey with cornbread stuffing, glazed spiral ham prime rib with horseradish sauce, garlic mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, candied sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce dinner rolls, and an assortment of homemade desserts including pecan pie, pumpkin pie, and Christmas cookies. I'll be far too busy coordinating activities and making sure everyone feels welcome. Jessica explained, dismissing any suggestion that she might assist with cooking. My family expects the homeowner to provide authentic hospitality, and they're really looking forward to your famous cooking. The irony was that Jessica had never tasted my cooking beyond those Sunday snickerdoodles, yet she confidently promised her relatives a culinary experience I had never agreed to provide. The entire plan assumed my enthusiastic cooperation without bothering to secure my actual consent. Initially, despite my growing suspicions about Jessica's motives, part of me felt touched by the prospect of a house filled with family laughter during the holidays. The past 2 Christmases had been painfully quiet affairs, marked more by Robert's absence than any celebration. Perhaps having children running through the halls and adults sharing stories around the dinner table would revive some of the joy these rooms had once held. I agreed, tentatively asking practical questions about grocery budgets, household logistics, and whether the septic system could handle such increased usage. Jessica brushed away these concerns with vague assurances that everything would work out perfectly and that her family was very low maintenance and easy to please. That afternoon, while Jessica ran errands in town, I decided to water the plants in the sunroom, where she often took her phone calls. I was adjusting the blinds when I heard her voice drifting through the window from the back patio. She was speaking to someone named Linda, presumably her sister, in Spanish, peppered with English phrases. My high school Spanish was rusty, but I caught enough to understand the general conversation. Jessica was laughing as she described her brilliant plan to overwhelm me completely during the holidays. She mentioned something about la vieja, the old woman, becoming confused and unable to handle the pressure of hosting duties. Then she switched to English and her words hit me like physical blows. 31 people staying for a week will definitely drive the old bat out permanently. She's already showing signs of confusion and forgetfulness. Uncle George will document everything professionally, and Patricia can file the guardianship papers immediately after Christmas. My legs nearly gave out as the full scope of their conspiracy became clear. This wasn't a family visit at all. This was a carefully orchestrated intervention designed to provide evidence of my mental incompetence. The chaos of cooking for 31 people, managing sleeping arrangements, and handling the constant demands of a house full of strangers was intended to break me down publicly and dramatically. Jessica continued outlining their strategy with casual cruelty. Uncle George, apparently a licensed physician, would observe and document every moment when I appeared, overwhelmed, confused, or unable to remember names or faces in the crowd. Patricia, who worked in elder law, had already prepared guardianship paperwork that would grant them legal control over my person and property immediately following their manufactured mental health crisis. The best part is that she'll actually thank us later, Jessica told Linda with obvious satisfaction. Once we get her into a nice assisted living facility, she won't have to worry about maintaining this big house or making complicated decisions. We're really doing her a favor while solving our financial problems at the same time. The casual way she discussed destroying my autonomy and stealing my home while claiming moral justification made my blood run cold. Jessica had convinced herself that elder abuse was actually elder care, that theft was actually assistance, and that manipulation was actually kindness. I remained frozen by the window, listening to her laugh about my anticipated breakdown until she ended the call and returned inside. When she found me in the sunroom, I was carefully watering my orchids with hands that barely trembled. My face, arranged in the pleasant, slightly vacant expression she had come to expect from confused old Mom Kathy. "How are the plants looking today?" she asked brightly, apparently unaware that I had overheard her planning my destruction. "Beautiful as always, dear," I replied, marveling at my ability to maintain a calm tone while my entire world shifted beneath me. "I was just thinking how lovely it will be to have your family here for Christmas. 31 people will certainly make the house feel alive again." Jessica beamed at me, clearly interpreting my response as evidence of my naive enthusiasm for her trap. She had no idea that I was already 3 steps ahead planning my own strategy, while she believed she was manipulating a helpless victim. That evening, I began my real Christmas preparations, not cooking plans or shopping lists, but careful documentation of every conversation, every forged signature, and every piece of evidence that would expose Jessica and Michael's conspiracy. They wanted to play games with a retired elementary school teacher who had spent 40 years managing clever children and their schemes. They were about to discover that underestimating me would be their biggest mistake. The following Tuesday afternoon, while Jessica attended her monthly book club meeting and Michael was traveling through Colorado for client presentations, I implemented phase 1 of my investigation. My heart hammered against my ribs as I climbed the stairs to what was once my master bedroom, now occupied by the couple who planned to steal everything Robert and I had built together. Jessica's laptop sat open on the antique dressing table that had belonged to my grandmother, surrounded by financial documents I recognized as copies of my own banking statements. Fighting down a surge of nausea, I carefully photographed everything with my smartphone before gently waking the computer from sleep mode. What I discovered in her email account shattered any remaining illusion about my son's innocence in this conspiracy. The correspondence between Jessica and Michael revealed a betrayal so profound that I had to read certain messages multiple times before accepting their reality. Michael's gambling addiction had started 18 months ago with casual sports, betting that escalated into compulsive behavior, consuming every spare dollar. His debts totaled nearly $200,000, spread across online platforms, private bookmakers, and increasingly dangerous loan sharks who'd begun making explicit threats about physical consequences. Jessica had discovered Michael's addiction accidentally when collectors started calling the house, demanding payment. Instead of encouraging him to seek help or threatening to leave, she saw an opportunity to solve their financial crisis through theft disguised as family intervention. Mom's house is worth at least $800,000 according to the county assessment, Michael had written in one email that made me grip the desk chair for support. She's getting confused more often, forgetting conversations and losing track of appointments. We could probably make a case for incompetency without much difficulty. Another message revealed the depth of Michael's participation in planning my downfall. I've been keeping track of her forgetful moments and weird behavior. Last week, she asked me the same question twice in one day, and she got confused about what day garbage pickup happens. Jessica's uncle can use that stuff for his evaluation. The clinical way my own son documented normal signs of aging as evidence of mental illness felt like discovering that a trusted friend had been poisoning me slowly over months. Every instance of typical human forgetfulness, every moment when I needed a second to remember a name or date had been weaponized against me by someone I loved unconditionally. Jessica's responses to Michael's reports were equally chilling in their calculated manipulation. She'd been researching elder abuse laws, guardianship procedures, and assisted living facilities for months while maintaining her facade of caring concern for my well-being. "Your mom trusts me completely," one message read. "She actually thanked me yesterday for helping her organize her financial paperwork. She has no idea I've been photographing everything for our files." The extent of their preparation was breathtaking in its thoroughness and terrifying in its implications. Jessica had compiled a comprehensive portfolio documenting my supposed mental decline, complete with photographs of forgotten grocery lists, recorded conversations where I sounded tired or confused, and detailed logs of every instance when I needed help with technology or modern conveniences. Most devastating was discovering that Michael had provided Jessica with my online banking passwords by watching me during routine computer sessions. They had been monitoring my financial accounts for months, tracking my spending patterns, and identifying assets they could target for theft. The email that nearly broke my composure entirely was Michael's response to Jessica's suggestion that they accelerate their timeline. "Mom's getting old anyway, and this house is way too big for her to manage alone. We're actually doing her a favor by getting her into professional care before she hurts herself. Plus, let's be honest, I'm the only child, so the inheritance should come to me eventually anyway. We're just helping that process along." Reading those words from my own son, the child I had raised with patience and unconditional love, the boy I had supported through college and celebrated through every achievement, felt like having my heart surgically removed without anesthesia. Michael genuinely believed he was entitled to steal my home because inheritance laws would eventually transfer my property to him after my death. He had apparently decided that waiting for natural inheritance was inconvenient, so fraud and elder abuse represented reasonable shortcuts to accessing what he considered rightfully his. The laptop contained additional evidence that expanded the scope of their criminal conspiracy. Jessica's uncle George had already prepared a preliminary psychological evaluation of me based entirely on Michael's reports and Jessica's covertly recorded videos. The document concluded that I showed clear signs of moderate dementia, requiring immediate supervised care and financial guardianship. This evaluation, prepared by a licensed physician who had never examined me or even met me in person, would serve as the cornerstone of their legal strategy to have me declared mentally incompetent. George had agreed to provide expert testimony supporting their guardianship petition in exchange for a $20,000 payment from the eventual house sale proceeds. I photographed every email, every document, and every piece of evidence before carefully returning the laptop to its original position. My hands remained steady throughout this process, but internally I was reeling from the magnitude of their betrayal and the sophistication of their planning. As I descended the stairs to my own kitchen, I marveled at my ability to maintain perfect composure. 40 years of managing classrooms full of children had taught me to control my facial expressions and emotional responses even during stressful situations. That professional training was now protecting me from revealing my discovery to the predators sharing my home. When Jessica returned from her book club that evening, I greeted her with the same pleasant warmth I had shown throughout our 2-year relationship. I asked about the meeting's discussion and listened attentively to her summary of their latest selection, nodding at appropriate moments while mentally reviewing the evidence I had gathered. "How was your afternoon, Mom Kathy?" she asked, apparently genuinely interested in my response. "Quiet and peaceful," I replied truthfully. I spent some time organizing Robert's old papers in the study. So many memories tucked away in boxes. Jessica's eyes sharpened slightly at mention of paperwork, probably wondering if I had discovered anything significant among Robert's documents. She offered to help with the organizing, claiming that sorting through old files might be emotionally overwhelming for someone my age. I declined her assistance, gracefully explaining that handling Robert's belongings was a process I needed to complete personally. What I didn't mention was that I was actually preparing a comprehensive file documenting her criminal conspiracy, complete with photographs of evidence and detailed timelines of their fraudulent activities. That night, I contacted Harold Brennan, the attorney who had handled Robert's estate and served as our family lawyer for over 2 decades. I scheduled an appointment under the pretense of updating my will for the holidays, claiming I wanted to ensure my final wishes were properly documented before Christmas. Harold had known me since Michael was in elementary school. He would immediately recognize whether I was showing genuine signs of mental decline or if I was being manipulated by people seeking to exploit me financially. His professional assessment would provide crucial testimony if this conspiracy ever reached court proceedings. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling where shadows danced from passing car headlights, I felt a strange sense of clarity settling over me like a warm blanket. The hurt and betrayal remained sharp and constant, but underneath those emotions was growing determination to protect myself and ensure justice for their crimes. Jessica and Michael had made a critical error in their planning. They had underestimated their target, assuming that age and grief had made me vulnerable and passive. They expected me to crumble under pressure, to become confused and helpless when faced with their manufactured crisis. Instead, they were about to discover that threatening someone's home and independence could awaken fierce protective instincts that transcended age or circumstance. I had spent decades nurturing and protecting my family, my students, and my community. Now it was time to protect myself with the same determination and intelligence. Christmas was still 3 weeks away. That gave me plenty of time to build an airtight case against them and ensure that their holiday surprise would be discovering the consequences of trying to destroy someone who refused to be a victim. The next morning, I began implementing a methodical strategy that would make my elementary school lesson plans look simple by comparison. While maintaining my facade of trusting cooperation, I started documenting every aspect of Jessica and Michael's conspiracy with the thoroughness of a detective building a criminal case. My first priority was establishing independent legal counsel without alerting the conspirators to my awareness of their plans. When I met with Harold Brennan later that week, ostensibly to update my will, I carefully gauged his reaction to my mental state and cognitive abilities before revealing the true purpose of my visit. Harold's law office occupied the second floor of a restored Victorian building, downtown, filled with leather-bound legal volumes and photographs spanning his 40-year career. He had guided Robert and me through home purchases, estate planning, and business investments with wisdom earned through decades of protecting honest families from legal complications. "Kathy, you seem as sharp and articulate as ever," Harold observed after we completed the preliminary will discussion. "Your memory for dates, financial details, and family history appears completely intact. What's really troubling you?" I took a deep breath and began explaining my situation, starting with the forged signatures and progressing through Jessica's phone conversations to the comprehensive conspiracy I had uncovered. Harold's expression grew increasingly grave as I presented photographs of the email correspondence and documentation of their planning. "This represents a sophisticated elder abuse scheme," Harold said grimly, reviewing the evidence I had compiled. "Financial exploitation, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit guardianship abuse. These are serious felonies with potential sentences reaching decades in federal prison." He immediately began investigating the legal documents bearing my forged signature, discovering that Jessica had not only falsified my responses to real estate inquiries, but had also submitted applications for power of attorney, using fabricated medical records claiming I had received a dementia diagnosis. "The medical records are completely fictional," Harold explained, showing me photocopies Jessica had submitted to support her power of attorney application. "The physician listed as your doctor moved to Oregon 18 months ago, and his replacement has no record of treating you for cognitive issues." This revelation exposed another layer of Jessica's criminal sophistication. She had researched my medical history thoroughly enough to identify a former physician whose relocation would make verification difficult, then fabricated consultation notes and diagnostic reports that appeared professionally authentic. Harold contacted the state medical board to report the fraudulent use of a licensed physician's credentials, while simultaneously filing complaints with the district attorney's office about the broader conspiracy. He assured me that law enforcement would begin monitoring Jessica and Michael's activities immediately, though arrests would wait until we had documented the complete scope of their criminal enterprise. Meanwhile, I expanded my covert investigation into their financial activities, discovering theft that exceeded my worst fears. Over the past 8 months, Jessica had been systematically draining my checking account through seemingly innocent transfers for household expenses and emergency car repairs that never actually occurred. Using online banking access she had gained by observing my passwords, Jessica had stolen nearly $15,000 in small amounts designed to avoid triggering fraud detection algorithms. She'd also been selling items from my house through online marketplaces, including Robert's coin collection, several pieces of antique furniture and jewelry I thought I had misplaced. The investigation revealed that Michael had been accessing my investment accounts as well, using information gathered during family financial discussions to answer security questions and reset passwords. They had liquidated almost $30,000 in bonds and certificates of deposit, transferring the proceeds to accounts under Jessica's maiden name. More disturbing was my discovery that Jessica had been medicating me without my knowledge or consent. The herbal tea she prepared each evening contained mild sedatives purchased online, designed to make me groggy and confused the following morning. This artificially induced fogginess provided Jessica with opportunities to point out my concerning memory problems during phone calls with Michael and her family members. I began pretending to drink the tea while actually disposing of it, immediately noticing improved mental clarity and energy levels the following days. Jessica's reaction to my increased alertness was subtle but telling, as she began suggesting that I seemed overstimulated and might benefit from calming activities to reduce my apparent anxiety. The most shocking discovery came when I searched Michael's car while he and Jessica attended a wedding shower for one of her colleagues. Hidden beneath his spare tire, I found a receipt for a $3,000 deposit at Sunset Manor Assisted Living, along with admission paperwork already completed in my name. The admission date was December 26th, the day immediately following their planned Christmas intervention. Jessica and Michael had arranged for my involuntary commitment to occur within hours of their family's staged mental health crisis. The paperwork included falsified consent forms bearing my forged signature and medical authorizations, granting them complete control over my healthcare decisions. Sunset Manor's brochure described their facility as specializing in memory care for patients with moderate to severe cognitive decline requiring 24-hour supervision. The monthly fees exceeded $4,000 money that would come directly from selling my house and liquidating my remaining assets. I photographed every document before returning them to their hiding place, adding this evidence to the comprehensive file I was building for law enforcement. The calculated cruelty of their planning was breathtaking. They had orchestrated every detail of my destruction while maintaining loving facades and expressing concern for my well-being. That evening, I called my dear friend Margaret Walsh, who had taught third grade in the classroom next to mine for 25 years before retiring. Margaret lived alone since her husband's death 4 years earlier, and we had maintained close contact through weekly coffee meetings and regular phone conversations. "Kathy, you sound different," Margaret observed immediately. "More determined and focused than you've been since Robert passed away. What's happening?" I explained my situation carefully, knowing that Margaret's witness testimony about my mental state would be crucial if this conspiracy reached court proceedings. She was outraged by Jessica and Michael's betrayal, offering immediate assistance with documentation and emotional support. Margaret agreed to visit regularly during the coming weeks, providing independent verification of my cognitive abilities and mental health. As a fellow retired educator, she understood the importance of detailed record-keeping and objective observation in building a strong case. "Those vultures picked the wrong target," Margaret declared with the fierce protectiveness that had made her legendary among parents whose children faced bullying. "You've got a mind sharper than people half your age, and now you're motivated to protect yourself. They're going to regret underestimating a teacher who spent 40 years outmaneuvering clever children." Over the following days, I installed a discreet recording application on my smartphone and began capturing Jessica's phone conversations with her family members. The recordings revealed additional details about their conspiracy, including plans for Uncle George's professional evaluation and Patricia's strategy for expediting guardianship proceedings through holiday court schedules. Jessica's casual confidence in their plan was evident in every conversation. She genuinely believed that I was too naive and trusting to suspect their intentions, too overwhelmed by grief to protect myself effectively, and too isolated to seek help from anyone who might interfere with their scheme. Her greatest mistake was assuming that advanced age automatically meant diminished capability. She'd confused Robert's protective presence in our marriage with dependence on his decision-making, not understanding that I had always been an equal partner in managing our financial affairs and making important choices about our future. As Christmas approached and Jessica's family prepared for their arrival, I felt increasingly confident about my ability to turn their own plan against them. They wanted to use the chaos of 31 house guests to document my incompetence. Instead, I would use their visit to expose their conspiracy in front of witnesses who could testify about Jessica's true character and intentions. The stage was set for a Christmas revelation that would give Jessica and Michael exactly the surprise they deserved, though not the outcome they had planned. December 23rd arrived with unseasonably warm weather that felt like a gentle blessing on my carefully laid plans. Jessica bustled around the house with nervous energy, repeatedly checking her lists and making last-minute phone calls to coordinate her family's arrival. She had no idea that I had spent the previous 3 weeks systematically contacting each of her relatives through social media and carefully crafted phone conversations. My approach to Jessica's family members had been masterfully subtle, designed to appear as nothing more than enthusiastic anticipation for our Christmas gathering. I introduced myself as Kathy Michael's mother, and Jessica's excited mother-in-law expressing genuine delight about finally meeting everyone in person. During these conversations, I casually mentioned how Jessica had been helping me manage some confusing paperwork and had suggested that I might benefit from family input about my memory concerns. I wondered aloud if Jessica had mentioned anything about my supposed cognitive difficulties, presenting myself as someone slightly worried about normal aging processes. The responses I received were immediately telling. Jessica's father, Thomas Martinez, a retired police officer with 32 years of experience, grew suspicious when I described Jessica's claims about my mental state. His law enforcement background had taught him to recognize elder abuse schemes, and my articulate, coherent phone manner contradicted everything Jessica had told her family about my condition. "Mrs. Stewart, you sound completely lucid and intelligent to me," Thomas said during our second conversation. "Jessica described you as confused and forgetful, but you remember details about conversations we had weeks ago. Something doesn't add up here." Jessica's mother, Rosa, was equally troubled by the contradictions between my actual presentation and Jessica's descriptions of my supposed mental decline. As a retired school nurse, Rosa understood cognitive assessment and recognized that my speech patterns, memory function, and logical reasoning showed no signs of dementia or mental impairment. Uncle George, the physician whose credentials Jessica planned to exploit, was horrified to learn that his professional reputation was being used to support fraudulent medical evaluations. When I explained that Jessica had told her family he would be providing expert testimony about my mental health, he immediately recognized the ethical and legal violations this represented. "I've never examined you, never reviewed your medical records, and certainly never provided any professional assessment of your cognitive abilities," George told me firmly. "Using my medical license to support false claims about your mental health would be grounds for losing my credentials and facing criminal charges." Patricia, the cousin who worked in elder law, was perhaps the most shocked by Jessica's deception. Her legal expertise allowed her to immediately recognize the guardianship fraud Jessica had described as a family intervention to help Kathy transition to appropriate care. "What Jessica outlined to me represents multiple felonies," Patricia explained during our confidential phone conversation: "elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy, and guardianship manipulation. If she's really planning what she described, she could face decades in prison." One by one, Jessica's relatives agreed to help me expose the conspiracy while maintaining their facade of normal holiday anticipation. Thomas, with his law enforcement background, understood the importance of gathering evidence and coordinating with authorities. He contacted Detective Sarah Washington, a colleague from his former department who specialized in financial crimes and elder abuse investigations. Rosa offered to document Jessica's behavior during the visit, using her medical background to assess whether Jessica showed signs of mental illness that might explain her willingness to manipulate and exploit elderly family members. George prepared to provide legitimate medical evaluation of my cognitive abilities, creating professional documentation that would contradict Jessica's fraudulent claims. Patricia researched the legal documents Jessica had mentioned, discovering that several filings had already been submitted to family court using forged signatures and fabricated medical evidence. She began preparing counter-documentation that would expose the fraud while protecting my rights and assets from further manipulation. By the time Jessica's family members began arriving on December 23rd, they were fully informed about the conspiracy and prepared to gather evidence while appearing to participate in normal holiday activities. Their moral outrage at Jessica's deception had transformed them from unwitting accomplices into active allies committed to ensuring justice. Jessica had no idea that her own family members were working against her as they embraced me warmly and settled into the guest accommodations she had arranged. The irony was exquisite. She had orchestrated this gathering to provide witnesses to my supposed mental breakdown, but instead had assembled a group of informed observers who would document her own criminal behavior. Christmas Eve morning began with Jessica's elaborate meal preparation plan designed to overwhelm me with impossible demands, while Uncle George observed and documented my inevitable failure to manage the complexity. Instead, Rosa quietly took charge of breakfast coordination, organizing Jessica's relatives into efficient cooking teams while praising my organizational skills and mental acuity. "Kathy, your meal planning is incredibly detailed and well thought out," Rosa announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You've managed the logistics for 31 people better than most professional event planners could handle." George made a point of engaging me in complex conversations about current events, medical developments, and family history, demonstrating my sharp memory and clear reasoning abilities to anyone who might be observing. His professional assessment, which he documented discreetly throughout the day, would provide expert testimony contradicting Jessica's claims about my mental state. As Christmas Eve dinner approached, Jessica grew increasingly frantic as her carefully planned chaos failed to materialize. Instead of witnessing my breakdown under pressure, her family members were praising my competence and questioning her previous descriptions of my supposed cognitive problems. The climactic moment arrived when Harold Brennan appeared at our front door as a surprise holiday visitor, accompanied by Detective Sarah Washington, who'd been introduced to the family as Thomas's former colleague, stopping by to deliver Christmas greetings. Jessica Martinez and Michael Stewart. Detective Washington announced formally presenting official identification and legal documents. "You're both under arrest for elder abuse fraud, forgery, theft, and conspiracy to commit guardianship fraud." Jessica's face drained of color as she realized her conspiracy had been completely exposed. "This is insane," she stammered, looking desperately around the room for support from family members, who were now staring at her with obvious disgust and disappointment. Harold presented the evidence we had compiled over the previous week's photographs of forged documents, recordings of Jessica's planning conversations, bank records documenting financial theft, and testimony from multiple witnesses about the conspiracy to have me falsely declared mentally incompetent. Michael, who had been enjoying Christmas Eve dinner while anticipating my imminent destruction, began shouting denials and accusations as he realized their scheme had collapsed spectacularly. "She's lying about everything," he yelled, pointing at me with genuine hatred. "Mom's been getting confused and forgetful. We were trying to help her before she hurt herself." Thomas, his former father-in-law and retired law enforcement officer, stepped forward with calm authority. "Son, I've been watching Kathy closely for 2 days. Her memory is perfect. Her reasoning is sharp, and her ability to manage complex situations exceeds most people half her age. The only confusion here comes from your lies about her condition." The evidence against them was overwhelming and undeniable. Jessica's own emails outlining the conspiracy, Michael's messages documenting his gambling debts and entitlement to my property, the forged legal documents, the stolen money, and the falsified medical records created an airtight criminal case. As Detective Washington read them their rights and explained the charges, Jessica began sobbing and begging her family for understanding. "I was trying to help," she insisted desperately. "Michael was in trouble with dangerous people. We needed money to save his life." Rosa, her own mother, shook her head with profound disappointment. "Helping your husband doesn't justify destroying an innocent woman's life, Jessica. What you planned was evil, and you tried to use our family to accomplish it." The handcuffs clicking into place around Jessica's wrists marked the end of their conspiracy and the beginning of consequences they had never imagined facing. Their Christmas surprise had become my justice, delivered with the precision and thoroughness of someone who refused to be anyone's victim. The living room fell silent except for the gentle crackling of logs in the fireplace as Detective Washington completed the arrest procedures. Jessica's family members sat in stunned disbelief, processing the magnitude of deception they had unknowingly been recruited to support. The warm Christmas Eve atmosphere had transformed into something resembling a courtroom where truth was finally being served. Jessica collapsed onto the sofa, her carefully constructed facade crumbling like a house of cards in a windstorm. Between desperate sobs, she began confessing details that expanded the scope of their criminal conspiracy beyond what even my thorough investigation had uncovered. Michael's gambling debts weren't just $200,000. She admitted, her voice breaking with panic. He owes almost $400,000 to people who threatened to kill him if he didn't pay by New Year's Day. They showed up at his office last month with photographs of our apartment and license plate numbers. This revelation explained Michael's increasingly erratic behavior over the past weeks. The pressure from violent debt collectors had driven him beyond desperate into genuinely dangerous territory, where theft seemed like survival rather than greed. Jessica's confession continued pouring out as she realized that cooperation with authorities might reduce her eventual prison sentence. She admitted to drugging my evening tea with sedatives purchased from online pharmaceutical suppliers, stealing and selling Robert's belongings through multiple online platforms, and systematically emptying my financial accounts through carefully planned transfers designed to avoid detection. I documented everything to make her look confused and incompetent. Jessica sobbed, glancing at me with something resembling remorse. I recorded her when the medication made her groggy in the mornings. I took pictures of her forgetting where she put her reading glasses. I made her seem sicker than she was. Michael, however, showed no signs of remorse or recognition of wrongdoing. Faced with the collapse of his scheme and the certainty of serious prison time, he erupted in a violent tantrum that revealed his true character to everyone present. "She owes me this house," he screamed, struggling against the handcuffs as 2 additional officers entered to assist with his arrest. "I'm her only child. Everything she owns should come to me anyway. We were just speeding up the inevitable." His words hit the room like physical blows, exposing the entitled thinking that had justified elder abuse in his mind. Thomas Martinez, with his law enforcement experience, recognized the dangerous mindset of someone who felt genuinely wronged by the consequences of his own criminal behavior. "You plan to destroy your own mother's life for money," Thomas said quietly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had arrested countless criminals over 3 decades. "That's not inheritance, son. That's theft with a family relationship that makes it even more evil." Michael's response revealed depths of selfishness that shocked even the officers conducting his arrest. "I sacrificed my career to take care of her," he shouted, apparently believing his own twisted narrative. "I moved into this house to help her after Dad died. I've been managing her finances and making sure she doesn't make stupid decisions. She should be grateful, not pressing charges." Detective Washington later explained that Michael's perception of reality had become completely distorted by gambling addiction and financial desperation. He genuinely believed that providing minimal assistance to his widowed mother entitled him to steal her entire life savings and have her declared mentally incompetent. The true extent of Michael's criminal behavior emerged during questioning, when federal agents arrived to arrest him for additional charges unrelated to my case. His gambling debts had driven him to embezzle medications from his pharmaceutical sales territory, selling prescription samples to illegal dealers who redistributed them on the black market. "We've been investigating Mr. Stewart for drug trafficking for 6 months," explained Agent Martinez from the DEA. "His theft and resale of controlled substances represents a federal crime with mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines. Combined with the elder abuse charges, he's looking at potential sentences exceeding 30 years. This revelation devastated Jessica, who realized she had been manipulated by someone far more dangerous than she understood. Her cooperation with the investigation became complete as she sought to distance herself from Michael's more serious criminal activities. "I had no idea about the drug dealing," she insisted desperately. "Michael told me his debts were from sports betting and casino losses. I thought we were stealing from one person to solve a gambling problem, not participating in federal drug crimes. Harold Brennan and Detective Washington worked efficiently to secure all assets involved in the investigation, freezing accounts Michael and Jessica had used for money laundering while recovering stolen items and funds for return to my possession. The financial recovery process would take several months, but preliminary estimates suggested that most of my losses could be restored with interest and penalties. As the evening progressed and the arrests were completed, Jessica's family members approached me individually to express their profound apologies for their unwitting participation in the conspiracy. Their genuine shock and moral outrage at Jessica's deception provided powerful testimony about her character and the extent of her manipulation. "She told us you were confused and needed help making decisions," Rosa explained tearfully. "We came here planning to support a family intervention for someone with dementia. Instead, we discovered our own daughter was planning to destroy a completely healthy woman's life for money." Uncle George the physician was particularly disturbed by Jessica's use of his medical credentials to support fraudulent evaluations. "I've reported this to the state medical board and offered to provide expert testimony about your actual mental health," he told me firmly. "Your cognitive abilities are completely normal for someone your age. Jessica's claims about dementia were absolute fabrications." The evening concluded with Detective Washington explaining the legal process that would follow their arrests. Both Michael and Jessica would remain in custody pending arraignment with bail, unlikely given the severity of charges and Michael's connections to violent criminal organizations through his gambling debts. "Mrs. Stewart, your case represents one of the most sophisticated elder abuse schemes we've investigated," Detective Washington explained. "Your documentation and evidence gathering made our job significantly easier, and your courage in protecting yourself probably prevented this from becoming a much worse situation." As the house gradually emptied of law enforcement personnel and Jessica's family members prepared for an awkward night's stay before returning home, I reflected on the complete reversal of fortune that had occurred. Jessica and Michael's Christmas surprise had indeed materialized, but as consequences for their own crimes rather than success in destroying me. The silence that settled over the house felt different from the loneliness I had experienced since Robert's death. This was the peace of safety restored, justice served, and self-respect reclaimed through courage and intelligence, rather than luck or outside intervention. 6 months later, I sat in my restored living room watching spring sunlight stream through windows that once again felt like home rather than a prison. The legal proceedings had concluded with both Michael and Jessica accepting plea bargains to avoid lengthy trials that would have resulted in even harsher sentences. Michael received 15 years in federal prison for elder abuse, financial fraud, drug trafficking, and embezzlement from his pharmaceutical company. The judge noted that his crimes demonstrated a pattern of exploiting trust relationships for personal gain, making him a danger to vulnerable populations. His gambling debts had indeed involved organized crime figures, but federal protection programs ensured his safety while serving his sentence. Jessica received 3 years in state prison with possibility of parole after 18 months contingent on her continued cooperation with authorities and completion of psychological counseling programs. Her sentence reflected her genuine remorse and the court's recognition that she had been manipulated by Michael's desperate circumstances, though her actions remained inexcusable. The financial recovery exceeded everyone's expectations. Harold Brennan's meticulous documentation enabled prosecutors to trace every stolen dollar and recover assets through civil forfeiture procedures. Michael's employer's insurance policy provided additional restitution for the pharmaceutical thefts, and Jessica's online sales of my belongings were reversed through platform fraud protections. My house, now legally secured with ironclad protections against future fraud, had been appraised at $950,000 due to recent neighborhood improvements and the historic preservation work Robert and I had completed over decades. All stolen funds were returned with court-ordered interest and penalties, leaving me financially stronger than before the conspiracy began. More importantly, the experience had transformed my understanding of myself and my capabilities. For too long after Robert's death, I had accepted the role of vulnerable widow, grateful for any family attention, even when that attention came with hidden costs and manipulative intentions. The investigation and legal proceedings had reminded me that I possessed intelligent strength and resourcefulness that transcended age or marital status. Protecting myself from predators required the same skills I had used throughout my teaching career: careful observation, strategic planning, and decisive action when circumstances demanded intervention. Jessica's family members had maintained contact with me, expressing ongoing shame about their daughter's behavior, while developing genuine friendships based on mutual respect and shared interests. Thomas Martinez had become a regular visitor, helping me install a comprehensive home security system while sharing stories about his law enforcement career. Rosa brought homemade tamales every few weeks and helped me plan a vegetable garden that would honor Robert's memory while creating new growing projects. Uncle George had provided me with comprehensive medical and cognitive evaluations that documented my excellent physical and mental health, creating official records that would protect me from future manipulation attempts. His professional documentation served as insurance against anyone who might question my competence or decision-making abilities. The house itself had been restored to reflect my personality and preferences, rather than Jessica's modern aesthetic. Robert's reading corner was recreated exactly as he had arranged it, filled with his favorite books and photographs from our 42 years of marriage. The rooms once again felt like home, rather than a stage set for someone else's vision. I had made significant life changes that reflected my renewed confidence and independence. The Scotland trip I had always dreamed of became reality when I spent 3 weeks visiting distant cousins who welcomed me with authentic warmth and shared family stories spanning generations. The experience reminded me that the world remained full of good people and beautiful places waiting to be discovered. My volunteer work at the community college's literacy program provided purpose and fulfillment that honored my teaching background while helping adults achieve educational goals they had deferred for decades. Working with students who faced genuine challenges reminded me that real hardship builds character rather than entitlement. Most surprisingly, I had begun dating again after meeting Frank Coleman at my church's senior social group. Frank, a retired engineer whose wife had died 3 years earlier, shared my interests in gardening local history and quiet evenings reading together. Our relationship developed slowly and naturally, built on mutual respect and companionship rather than financial dependency or convenience. The book club I joined introduced me to contemporary literature and provided intellectual stimulation that kept my mind engaged with current ideas and perspectives. My watercolor painting classes revealed artistic abilities I had never explored while raising a family and managing a teaching career. These activities filled my calendar with meaningful commitments that reflected my own choices rather than other people's expectations. For the first time in decades, I was living authentically as myself rather than in roles defined by relationships with others. The most profound change was my understanding of family loyalty and obligation. I had spent years believing that being a good mother meant accepting any behavior from my child, forgiving any transgression, and prioritizing his needs above my own well-being. Michael's betrayal taught me that real love requires boundaries, and that enabling destructive behavior helps no one. I had learned to distinguish between genuine family relationships built on mutual care and respect, and manipulative relationships that exploited familial obligations for personal gain. Real family members celebrate your independence and protect your well-being rather than scheming to steal your security and dignity. The legal proceedings had also educated me about elder abuse patterns and prevention strategies. I now volunteer with the county's Elder Services Program, helping other seniors recognize warning signs of financial exploitation and family manipulation. My experience provided credible testimony about how sophisticated these schemes could become, and why victims often failed to recognize them until serious damage occurred. As Christmas approached again, I was planning a small dinner party for my book club friends and Frank cooking because I enjoyed hospitality rather than because I was being exploited. The house would be decorated with ornaments from my marriage to Robert and new decorations reflecting the life I was building in this unexpected chapter. The guest list included Margaret Walsh, my teaching colleague, who had provided crucial support during the investigation, Thomas and Rosa Martinez, who had become genuine friends despite the circumstances of our meeting, Harold Brennan and his wife Susan, who had guided me through legal complexities with wisdom and patience, Detective Sarah Washington, who had become a friend after our professional relationship concluded. These relationships were built on honesty, mutual respect, and shared values rather than financial dependency or family obligation. Each person on my Christmas list had earned their place through authentic caring and genuine concern for my happiness and well-being. The experience had taught me that self-worth isn't determined by family relationships or other people's approval, but by how courageously and intelligently you protect your own dignity and independence. Saying no to exploitation isn't selfish, it's necessary for living authentically and maintaining self-respect. Standing up for yourself requires strength that many people never develop because they're never threatened severely enough to discover their own capabilities. I had learned at 67 that I possessed resources I had never needed to access while my life remained comfortable and protected. The lesson I carried forward was simple but profound. Protect yourself with the same determination you would use to protect someone you love completely. Your own well-being deserves the fierce advocacy you would provide for your children, your spouse, or your dearest friends. As I prepared for this second Christmas season, I felt grateful for the unexpected education in my own strength and resourcefulness. The experience had been painful beyond description, but it had also revealed capabilities and courage I might never have discovered under different circumstances. My reflection concluded with deep appreciation for the life I was now living, authentic, independent, and surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, rather than what I could provide for them. This was the Christmas gift I had given myself by refusing to be anyone's victim and fighting back with intelligence, courage, and determination. The house was quiet again, but this silence felt like peace rather than loneliness. I was home in every sense of that word, safe, secure, and completely myself. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who tried to take advantage of your kindness or generosity? How did you find the courage to protect yourself when the people who should have cared for you were the ones causing harm? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and share it with anyone who might need to hear about the importance of protecting themselves and maintaining strong boundaries with family members. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult situations and standing up for what's right. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that it's never too late to fight for your dignity and independence. May you always have the courage to protect what matters most and surround yourself with people who genuinely care about your happiness and well-being.